Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our case study presentation at the 23rd CEOPSA conference in the theme of rehumanizing work. Today, we are very privileged and very happy to be co-presenting with one of our clients, that's Pat Smith, who is a talent manager at PEP Stores. And I will be joined by my colleague, Caitlin Cabell. I'm Jayendra Naidu. I'm one of those senior organizational psychologists at HFM Talent Index. Caitlin?
Thank you, Jayendra. So as Jayendra said, my name is Caitlin. I have been at HFM Talent Index since 2015, and I am one of the psychologists on the team. And we are very fortunate to have been working hand in hand with PEP since around 2015 as well. And today's topic is partnering with PEP talent management during a crisis, the value of agility in a people-centered culture. So before we get into the meat of the case study, we wanted to take a little time to introduce PEP as a business and their history, as well as the history and processes of talent management within the business. So PEP was first started in 1965 by Renier van Rooyen in De Aar. And he was seen as a visionary of the time because he wanted to create a store that treated everyone, black, white, Indian colored, as equal, even though it was during the apartheid time. And when he first opened PEP, it was very unique in that people were able to go into the store, they were able to touch the clothes, feel the clothes, and decide what they wanted to buy themselves, which was actually quite different for that time. And since then, PEP has grown from strength to strength through the years. They are now the largest single brand retailer in Africa. And currently they have a very large footprint in South Africa, over 2,350 stores. And they are very ubiquitous, and most people know who PEP are, and they sell about 4,350 products every minute and serve over 30 customers every second. And I found it quite interesting to learn that school clothes at PEP are so popular that more than half of all school children in South Africa wear a uniform from PEP. So introducing PEP's mission, values, their vision, they are an extremely value-centered organization, and their culture plays a big role in not only people's experiences at PEP, but also the way that they manage their talent. And at the core of everything they do is a focus on people. So their vision is delighted customers. And really, when they talk about customers, they're talking about external customers at their stores, but also internal customers, whether that's colleagues, whether that's dynamos, team members. Their cause and their mission is to be a friendly retailer and to be trusted by the people that shop there, but also to enable the most amount of people to access the goods and clothing and whatever else that their family needs for the lowest prices. And the values at PEP are honesty, passion, and resourcefulness. So speaking of dynamos and what a dynamo is and the PEP culture, so over the years at PEP, up until 1998, they had quite a harsh culture, you could say, and they didn't really put too much effort into, working on their culture and thinking about their culture. And in around 1998, the company was actually doing quite badly financially and were on the verge of going bankrupt before they brought in a new CEO, Andre Labuskaghni. And one of the first things he implemented in the business is to work on structurally changing the culture and turning it around. And he worked to establish Sikula Kunye, which is the PEP culture today, and which means growing together. Now, the PEP culture, where they call each other dynamos, where they greet each other with a high five, like I said previously, it's extremely focused on people and on nurturing relationships and on fostering that sense of collaboration with one another. And another big part of the culture is providing opportunities for people to reach their true performance and potential. So lots and lots of development opportunities within the business. About or more than 50% of the store managers at PEP are developed and promoted from within the company. And like I said, a lot of the senior managers, middle managers, a lot of them have also been, systematically and structurally grown throughout the company and have been with the company for many years and have gone through lots and lots of learning opportunities along the way. So briefly touching on how PEP worked to establish Sekula Kunye. We believe, and PEP believes, that this is a fundamental part of their success as a business. And through their work with Barrett and the model of the Barrett values, they worked to really shift their culture over time from one that was potentially quite toxic or unsafe, where people were quite cautious and there was a big focus on not making a mistake, over time working towards creating a culture what it is today, which is one of being quite integrated, quite inspired, where people feel that they have shared values, shared goals, and really a shared vision that they can all agree upon, and where there's stakeholder stewardship and where people honor the principles. So that's a little bit of background into PEP and who they are. And I wanted to spend a little bit of time introducing the case study and what we will be talking about today and why. So like I said, we've worked with PEP for a few years now, and we have seen firsthand that they don't just talk about strategic talent management at the company, they really do practice it. And they have managed to successfully implement an agile culture and many other things which other businesses, find to be potentially quite difficult. Alongside their strategic talent management and perhaps the lessons that they can share on that front, they also managed to financially remain not only stable, but profitable during the COVID-19 pandemic, where they opened 81 new stores since COVID-19 hit and hired 716 new dynamos. So what we will be really focusing on today is, first of all, what did PEP put into place proactively before anyone had even heard the term COVID? What did they put into place to help prepare and future-proof their business? And what really helped them to be prepared when the pandemic struck? And then secondly, what did they do when the lockdown hit, when suddenly everything was thrown into chaos? Obviously, it was a new situation. You couldn't prepare for everything. So what did they do to then help their dynamos and help them to cope with the situation? And like I said, remain stable and profitable during that time. So let's talk about the work that they did to establish a culture of change resilience, and basically what they did to help future-proof them for situations of turbulence and change. So there's quite a few things that they have done over the years. One of the first things is they looked at the PEP success DNA. In other words, they wanted to find out what objective constructs and domains are related to performance and success of a PEP dynamo. And so what they did is they researched it amongst the successful group, and they really looked at which psychometric constructs are related to performance. And in doing so, they were really able to understand it, measure it, and then also use that information to develop existing staff and to hire new staff going forward. Secondly, like I said earlier, PEP have a long history of strategic talent management, and with that, a very long-standing tradition of using assessments. And previously, their focus was very much on assessment centers, where they ran full 2 to 3 day assessment center simulation focused assessment procedures for selection and development. Over time, since approximately 2015, all the way up until 2020, they were really focusing on recreating that information with psychometric assessments and on shifting over time to a fully online and technology-driven approach, where they could use a fully online approach to not only hire new people, but also develop people, and would not be dependent anymore on 2 to 3 days of people's time in order to achieve their results. And as I mentioned previously, a lot of focus on development and the development of not only leadership, but all levels of the business. And part of the development programs that they were running for leaders and elsewhere is what PEP have come to call agility. Now, agility is known by in many terms, things like flexibility, adaptability, change management, change agility. But calling it by learning agility and understanding it was really what helped PEP to, like I said, understand it and measure it and be able to develop that and prioritize that in their leadership development programs and structurally start to measure that as well in the rest of the organization. And one can compare agility to the PEP value of resourcefulness. And there's a lot of overlap between those terms. It's all about being able to confront change and effectively cope with change and move forward and be proactive. So just to talk through some models that PEP uses within the business. The first one is the potential to performance model. And the second is a little bit of background in terms of what we mean by agility. So, potential to performance. Traditionally, PEP were quite focused on performance when they ran their assessment centers and the simulations. What they were hoping to see is the observed behavior or the demonstrated behavior of candidates, and then be able to use that to predict their job performance. However, since they started to focus on a fully online psychometric approach, the attention shifted towards measuring potential and measuring the role of potential and how potential can actually, predict a person's performance in the role. And the fact that potential is actually quite a stable construct that would predict performance. So often organizations see potential, like I said, as being something that predicts performance, but that's quite set in stone. The one thing that PEP realized is the importance of both internal and external factors in this puzzle. And the fact that, potential, or the fact that the relationship between potential and performance can really be held back by certain things or really flourish in the face of certain things. So the organizational culture is one example of how PEP works to really maximize people's performance. And the other way is looking at some internal catalysts of performance, such as the individual's motivations and their interests, and really assessing these and aligning these to the PEP fit and what makes a dynamo successful to ensure that they fit well within the organization and do well. And then overarching this full picture is learning agility, which PEP sees to have a strong relationship with leadership and employee performance. And this is also backed up in terms of the research and the literature on agility. But speaking of agility, like I said, it's known by many names. I wanted to just give the definition and the understanding of the construct in the way that PEP and HFM Talent Index look at learning agility. So first of all, just to define it, like I said, it's all about coping with change. It is not a type of cognitive ability. It's not a form of intelligence, but it's really about a person's preferences and motivations in the face of change. And formally, it is the ability to develop new effective behavior in the face of new circumstances and situations. So the way that we measure agility is based on 5 domains or dimensions. Change agility, which is all about experimenting and trying new things. Mental agility, which is all about problem solving. Results agility, which is all about learning through goals and setting goals. People agility, which is all about learning through other people and from other people. And then very importantly, self-awareness, which is the willingness and the ability to self-reflect and maintain and develop one's own behavior. And self-awareness really does play a critical role and is the foundation of effective learning agility. And then just looking at the results of the success DNA that was done at PEP. So this was run by HFM Talent Index together with PEP in about 2018. And like I said, the goal was really to align psychometric data with what results in success at PEP. Really to understand the culture and what that means. So looking at the competencies, And out of our library of 44 different competencies, these 8 areas were the strongest amongst successful dynamos. So you can see a strong focus here on people, such as team building, and on being able to cope effectively with stress and motivate others, and to really have that enjoyment of personal development. Looking at learning agility, I think it makes a lot of sense that we see people agility here, very strong in the PEP culture, to be people agile. In other words, to want to brainstorm, to want to learn through others. And this is epitomized by the fact that the leaders, don't claim to have all the answers or dictate the answers to others, but there really is a focus on collaborative problem solving in the business. And like I said, that's really epitomized by people agility. And then change agility. We see from our interactions with PEP that they are very open to experimenting, very open to trying new things. And even if it means making a mistake, they're willing to listen to ideas, put something into action if there's merit behind it, and see what happens. Talking about role preferences. So what we mean by role preferences is we measure the motivations and role preferences based on the competing values framework. And out of 8 possible role preferences that one would have within a team, for PEP, the 2 most important ones were to take care of others, to be a caregiver, and to motivate and grow cooperation with others, which makes a lot of sense. And then in terms of the underlying motivators, out of 20 possible motivators that we measure, the 4 biggest drivers, the 4 biggest areas of energy and support for PEP dynamos were respect, commitment to the organization, cooperation with others, and then lastly, feeling at home, and that feeling that when you're at work, you're with your family and you're fully comfortable. And now Jainthran's going to take over, and he's going to talk about the steps that they took dealing with the COVID-19 fallout.
Thank you very much, Caitlin, for giving us a very solid foundation of understanding PEP's culture. And we can see very clearly how people are really at the center of PEP's culture. And for PEP, I guess it's not a case of rehumanizing work, because people have always been in the center, front and center for PEP. Okay. But when that crisis hit last year, March, so when that first hard lockdown was implemented, this could very easily have been interpreted as a crisis for many businesses, both from the business point of view as well as from the individual point of view. So for businesses, there were questions now being asked about whether the business could actually survive being closed for a few weeks. And individuals similarly were concerned about their livelihood and whether they would still have a job after the lockdown. So how did PEP actually deal with all of this and actually come out of it better than they actually went into the whole situation, by actually putting people at the heart of their approach, as is aligned to the culture that Caitlin has described to us. So how did they actually achieve all of this? First of all, by acknowledging that they need to build their leadership pipeline from within, and also by acknowledging that they needed a very particular type of leadership, namely an agile leadership. So PEP had agility built into their culture from the very early days, from the very day that they were actually founded, and more recently actually found a way, or effective way, of identifying and developing agile leaders and agility in leaders. And by actually developing this agile leader pipeline and culture, they were actually able to respond very quickly to the first lockdown and to the potential crisis that was being presented to them, by focusing on people. And some examples of how they actually did this, or evidence of what they actually did, was by being concerned about how people were going to manage through lockdown, and whether they were actually going to be prepared in terms of everything that they would need materially for being in lockdown. And PEP did something quite unprecedented, in that they were willing to actually interfere with their remuneration process, something that very few organizations, I think, would be willing to actually do. And within 1 or 2 days, leadership actually made a decision to change their remuneration process so that people were paid slightly earlier, so that they could actually prepare for lockdown. I think that in itself is quite impressive and illustrates how they actually put the people first. We have seen from everything that Caitlin has shown us that people agility is actually at the root of PEP's culture. It's all about collaborating with people, learning from people, and putting people first. Okay. And this is also demonstrated in the way they actually dealt with the pandemic crisis. They made sure that they took people along with them, that they made sure people felt safe, and that they knew that they were going to be taken care of, just as people were committed to taking care of the organization as well. And they made sure that people were kept informed with what was going on. So psychological safety plays a pivotal role for PEP, and this once again is embedded in their culture. They have a culture of making sure people understand that they can take risks quite safely, and they can actually make mistakes without there being any adverse repercussions. They also lead by example, and the CEO and the other executives are always at the forefront of communication. So everything from their recruitment, where executives make sure that they actually communicate with all of their potential new recruits, all the way through to communicating what is going on in terms of the pandemic. A comprehensive communication plan was put in place where different media was used to keep people informed, and also very importantly to keep in touch with people. So for example, there were various webinars, videos, and other methods of sharing stories, making sure people still were able to experience that culture that they were accustomed to when they actually went into the workplace, even though they were now working from home, and also made sure that they were able to adapt from working, or actually adapt to working from home. Okay. Their communication strategy um, used a four-prong method or four-level method. And when we look at this, you will recognize some parallels with something that we're very familiar with, namely Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So at the very basic level, they recognized that people needed to know that they were safe, physically safe, and also psychologically safe. So they needed to know that their jobs are safe, they could continue to earn a livelihood, and also that the company was stable and they wouldn't be losing their jobs because of the pandemic. The next issue was that of interrelatedness, and to ensure that the relationships did continue. So they demonstrated that the organization was loyal to the individual, to the dynamos, and the dynamos through the various media like the webinars, the videos, and so on, were also able to demonstrate loyalty to the organization and then still feel like they belong to the organization. But taking it a step further, not just belonging to the organization, but also knowing that the individual does add value and is important to the organization. So in other words, taking care of individuals' self-esteem and making sure that they understood that they are good enough for this new way of actually working. Once all of this was taken care of, they could look at it from a broader perspective, namely in terms of transformation. So not just of individuals, but of the organization and also of the very way of working. And also imparting the fact that we can navigate this new world of work together. Okay. How did PEP actually ensure that they acquire agile leaders and agile dynamos? This is embedded in their dynamic talent acquisition. So like Caitlin has already illustrated to us, PEP was able to make sure that their talent acquisition processes were aligned to current best practices. So at a time when maybe assessment centers were the best method of identifying talent, that is what PEP did. But as the needs changed, the environment evolved, they were actually able to move on to virtual ways of actually identifying talent. So everything currently done online, from interviews to panel interviews, and of course the assessments, all done online, reporting online, so without the need for face-to-face interaction with individuals, which is not possible during the pandemic and during lockdown. However, as we all know, probably one of the best ways for ascertaining a values and a cultural fit is by actually interacting with the individual. So face-to-face interaction was still maintained, albeit virtually, and the executives still made sure that they were able to engage with the top shortlisted individuals before appointment. So you can see that the role of assessments became even more critical because leaders couldn't possibly interview or sit in on interviews of all potential appointments, but they were able to sit in on the ones that were deemed most suitable for the role and for the team and the organization. Then further along in the talent pipeline, the talent process, in terms of onboarding and pre-boarding, this was also transformed to make everything accessible to individuals and make them all completely online. The onboarding process was transformed so that it was actually presented on a website and via a structured 12-week program that was presented online. Something else that is quite notable and quite impressive is that the graduate recruitment didn't skip a beat and continued through lockdown and through the pandemic. So 1,700 people expressed interest in actually becoming a dynamo. And this is also further evidence of how the culture of the organization attracts the top talent. And PEP was able to actually process the 1,700 applicants and at the end of the day, able to identify their 12 top candidates for appointment. What was the outcome of all of these initiatives? We can classify them broadly into four broad outcomes. The first one being that they were able to continue appointing the right leaders. So they understood from the very beginning that the right leadership was important for the success of the organization, and maintaining the right leadership became important. They were able to identify the right leaders and also develop leaders into the organization and from the organization as well. So PEP reaped benefits of their approach. They were able to see that putting people first pays off, and not just in terms of the numbers, not just in terms of the bottom line, because as Caitlin has indicated, PEP remained viable, profitable, and actually grew through the pandemic. But also on a qualitative level, they could see that their culture actually helped them to be resilient. It helped them to make sure that people didn't lose jobs, people remained engaged, people remained excited to work. And in the next slide, we'll actually show you an example of how excited people were. And we all know that engaged individuals are productive individuals. Through the initiatives, they were able to technology and future-proof their organization. So they were able to actually adapt and cope with new ways of doing things. They were able to actually make sure that the organization remained resilient. So they didn't need to actually do anything to specifically build resilience to crises, but through their initiatives of remaining people agile, of putting people first, and also building agile leadership, they made sure that they were able to navigate through what other organizations might have interpreted as a crisis, and were actually able to continue growing through that crisis. Okay. By putting a focus on building leadership from within, and by focusing on agility of leaders, the organization is able to ensure their long-term sustainability. Okay. So we've seen over the past few months that the sustainability has been demonstrated, and there is little doubt that PEP will continue to be resilient and sustainable in the long term as well. So the very last thing that we wanted to share with you is just a really nice example of how people remain so engaged, so enthusiastic, loyal, and committed to the organization. So what you see here are screenshots of videos that the dynamos put together on the day that they were informed that the stores can reopen. They were so excited to get back to work that they were actually able to get their stores up to standard in terms of COVID protocol and ready for business on the very day that they were given the go-ahead to actually open stores again. And here you can see how excited and enthusiastic individuals are. So not just getting on with the tasks in a mundane fashion, but really putting their energy and showing us how excited they are to be back at work. So thank you very much for joining us and listening to our story and the PEP case study and the journey that we have gone through with PEP. We are available for further questions and discussions.
Thank you very much.